Okay, what's up everyone? Shane, aka Wild Poker here. Today I'm coming at you with a quick video about how to study. I think this is one of the questions that gets asked most often while I'm streaming, and I figured the best thing to do would be to put together a video for it so we can just have the answer and have a place for people to come to quickly to get a good reference point, and it might be something that's a little bit more well thought out than what I would give on the fly while I'm streaming. So here we go. The first thing that's the most important is scheduling a time every week and really making sure you stick to it. This time is your study time. It's not going to be used for anything else, and it's you need to make sure that you're free from distractions and you're only focusing on studying and not trying to play poker or not trying to watch a video and then in the background you're I don't know, doing something else that is distracting you from your study. We need to be scheduling the time, a set time, and really sticking to it. And I think this is something that a lot of people are going to find very difficult to begin with. But if you're not doing it, you're really doing a disservice to your study time because you're going to just find all kinds of other things to do besides study. And so this is probably the key thing here, is making sure we stick to that study time. And I do want to point out here that if you're new to poker, if you're brand new to poker, it is very important to still be getting hands in, but the bulk of your time, the bulk of your full poker time should be study and not playing poker. It is, after you're studying, you do want to try out some of the concepts that you think you've been learning. You want to see if they apply in your games and see if you can use them correctly. And if you're not playing, you're not getting that experience to learn how and when to use the things that you've been learning. And you're not learning how the other players are playing, and maybe there's other things that you could find that could, during your play, that would be able to, that you could use against them even more. So getting hands in is very important. But we want to spend half, if not more, of our time, our poker time, studying. And as you feel you're getting better and better and beating the games more and more, we can start to lessen that. But you always want to have some study time scheduled. Even the best players in the world are still studying at a pretty regular frequency. So the next one is to mix it up. Don't always do the same thing every single time it comes time to study. You want to review your hands. You want to review maybe other players' hands, some of your friends. Go in forums and read posts about players that play at your stakes, or players that play higher than you, players that play lower than you. Review their hands. Not only are you reviewing hands, but review lines. Review your call down efficiency on the river. Review your check raises on turns. There's a lot of different things to review than just a couple hands that you've marked. So find anything out there that you can review about something. Read books. Those are definitely important. These are people who spend a lot of time thinking about something, some aspect of poker, and are putting all their ideas out there for you to take advantage of. And whether the book is outdated or maybe some of the things aren't actually true in the book, I think maybe for some of the older books you might find that to be true, but reading it and thinking about it is still going to give you a chance to learn from that book. So as long as you're not just taking everything you read as this is the answer, this is solving all the poker problems, as long as you're reading it and questioning it and trying to learn from it and see if it applies and really trying to absorb the material in that way, then I think you'll get something from just about anything that you read that's poker related. Watch videos. So there's plenty of training sites out there where you can watch other professionals play and they're going to be talking about it. But also record yourself and watch yourself play. That's another way to review. Have your friends record themselves and watch them play together. There's all kinds of things that you can do about watching poker play that isn't just coming from training sites or some of the YouTube content that is out there. Analyze. So this is when you're using some of the poker software that's out there and you're running through lines and seeing what's the best, most highest EV line with this hand, or what's the highest EV line with this range of hands. You really want to be going through away from the tables and really trying to analyze and pick apart all aspects of your game in every single situation and see what's the best for each spot. And this is going to take, over the long term, probably a lifetime to get it really down, but doing a little bit at a time you're definitely going to see noticeable gains the more you do these kind of analyzing spots. Drilling. So this is one thing I'll show a little bit later when I show some of the software that you can use for studying, and something I did on during one of my streams earlier. But there's a lot of different kind of drills you can do. I mean, you can make flashcards. If you have a really hard time coming up with pot odds, you could make flashcards that says if the player bets half pot, what kind of pot odds are you getting, and how often do you need good, and you're going through flashcards and drilling the pot odds. Minimum defense frequencies. If the opponent bets this much, what part of my range needs to call, and you can do that with flashcards. You can drill range versus range equities on board textures. You can drill hand versus range equities on board textures. And this is just things where you're just doing it quickly, and you're just kind of going over a bunch of spots really quick, and that's good for if you don't have much time to study, 15, 20 minutes, but it's something you can get into really quick. And even if you don't memorize all the spots, you're still training your brain to be able to come up with answers a lot quicker. And that is very important to do that as well. Doing a little bit of drilling here and there and getting quicker and faster with those types of things is definitely a good idea. And there's all other kinds of ways to study. Find what works for you, I guess, is one of the important things as well. As long as you're mixing it up and as long as you're doing things that you feel like you're getting some benefit from, just keep doing those things and you'll see some results for sure. Okay, and next you want to make sure that you're finding shortcuts to maximize your efficiency. So what that means is you're going to notice that there's things that you're doing over and over and over and over usually when you're analyzing certain spots. For example, putting in hand ranges in the software for under the gun versus the button. And you're clicking in the range of what you think, and a lot of times the ranges are going to be very similar. So instead of doing that over and over, just build that range somewhere and save it somewhere so that you can easily start using it. And that's going to save you a lot of time over the long run for sure. And basically anytime you're coming to a spot where you feel like you've done this again and again and again, find a way to cut that out so that you don't have to do it. And you can get to the part of the study what you're really trying to get to. And that's something that's really important. So if you notice yourself doing something over and over, try to cut that out. Try to get to the real meat and potatoes of the study session there. Getting in a study group is something that I actually never really did, but I think that a lot of people have told me, and I have read responses from people in forums that have high praise for study groups. And you do want to make sure that the study group is actually focused. If you guys are setting study times, everyone's sticking to that time. If you set a topic, everyone's sticking to that topic. People are coming prepared, and you're really getting a lot out of it. But building yourself a group of poker friends who are determined in poker to get better is only going to motivate you to try and get better and improve with them. And it's a really good space for you to bounce ideas around and really help you if you're stuck on something. Maybe someone else's ideas can come in there, or they can give you a different perspective that can help you get to the answer. If you're on the fence about it, try it out, and you might find that it really, really helps you in making sure you are studying and giving you some really good things to study. People, if you guys are watching me on Twitch, you are certainly more than welcome to try and form study groups in the chat while you're watching. If not, there's all kinds of forum. You can go to just about any poker forum, and there's always people trying to put study groups together. And just message them and go from there. And if it's not something that's really meshing with you, then usually it's pretty quick and easy to just say, "Sorry, guys, it's not for me. I'm out of here." And if it's something you really like, then boom, you've just got another tool at your disposal. So I wanted to throw that out there. And then another thing I wanted to talk about is making sure that you make your concept specific when you're studying. One thing that I think this is one of my biggest downfalls when I was studying is I just wanted to study it all at once. And you kind of the topic becomes so big and so overwhelming that you don't get anything done. I've spent a whole day trying to, I'll use this example, talk about 3-betting. I've spent an entire day trying to figure out 3-betting, and it was so big and I was trying to do so many different things at once that I didn't get anything done. And what I've learned from that is instead of doing just 3-betting, make it something even smaller. So what is the 3-betting range if I'm in the small blind versus cutoffs opening range? This is something that you could get even more specific than this, but at least when you have it broken down of this kind of thing, you have a very good starting point. You know where I am at, you know where the opponent's at, you have a good idea of what the ranges are, and you can start using some of the applicable math and theory to start building some good ranges there. And then the next thing you could do is move on to flops with these ranges that you've built and see what your c-betting is, what your check raising is, what your lines are. And you can just go step by step until you have a strategy, until you've basically built your small blind strategy, 3-betting strategy versus a cutoff. And I think that's a much better thing to do, is do it piece by piece, small bit by small bit, than trying to tackle the whole thing at once. It's just going to leave you pretty dumbfounded, at least it did for me, and left me pretty lost and had me spinning my wheels and not getting anything done. So I wanted to throw that one out there as well for you guys. So let's go a little bit more in depth about some of the study methods that are available. I think the biggest and the most important one is poker forums. And the reason for this is it allows you to take time away from the table and work through your thought process as deeply and as thoroughly as possible, so that when you get to the table, your brain has already practiced going through this situation and these things, and you've already spent a lot of time in detail and thinking about all the things that you need to think about in this spot. And so you can get to an answer much more quickly, which is pretty important, especially when people are playing online, when you have multiple tables going and you have limited time to act and respond. You need to be able to have that checklist already built in your brain of the things you need to think about, what are the important factors, and then once you've gone through that checklist, what does that mean you should do? And the way to get to that is by spending a lot of time away from the tables, practicing going through that thought process over and over and over and over. And the best way to do that and to force yourself to do that is to spend a lot of time in poker forums. And just when you do it, make sure you're not accepting one sentence responses, and make sure you're not the one putting those up there as well. When you post your hand up there, give your full in-depth analysis. Here's what I did. Here's what I was thinking. Here's why. You're breaking everything down, and then what do you think? And what happens is people come back and say, well, this part isn't really that important. I think it's more important to think about this aspect. And now your eyes are open to something else that you should be thinking about, and then you can go through that part. And if someone comes back and says, oh, that's a terrible call in that spot. Okay, why? Why is it a terrible call? What is the range that the other player has that makes it terrible? What about this situation makes it terrible? Try to ask more questions and get deeper and really push for people to give the clear and coherent answers that they should be giving when you're having a true discussion. And also, when you respond in other people's threads, which you should be doing both, posting your own and responding in other people's, make sure you're doing that same thing. Very long answers, trying to think through the whole thought process, everything that's important. Write it all down and put it out to them and let people see what your thought process is. Again, they're critiquing your thought process and the other players, and you get to see, what everyone's thinking about, what's important, what's not important, and it's just helping you refine that process and be ready to implement it much more quickly at the tables. So the other big benefit to it that a lot of people don't think about is if you're constantly in the forums. Let's say you play 10 no limit and you're in 10 no limit forums. The guys that are posting in there are the other regs at your stake. So those are the guys that are giving you probably the toughest time at the tables. If you're spending all of your time in there reading a bunch of their threads, you have a very good insight into their thought process. And so maybe you don't know which reg is posting it when you're sitting at playing against them, but you have a very good blueprint for what the average reg is thinking when they're playing a hand. And so if you're taking it to the next level, now that you know their thought process, you can actually use that and implement even better strategies to counter their thought process. The next one is watching training videos. I think this is key to getting better at poker. And so what you want to do is find a training site that's out there for you, that you feel like you respond well to the coaches, or it has the content that you're looking for in the areas that you're struggling with. What you want to make sure is that when you're watching the videos, you're watching the videos. All your attention needs to be put into the video. Some things that I used to do when I would watch them is when it gets to a spot in the hand that seems pretty difficult, I would actually pause before I heard the response, and I would take time and I would write out my entire response, go through my entire process like I was posting in a forum. And then after I'd gone through that, what I would have done, why, I hit play, and then I hear the coach's answer. And if it was different than mine, then I would post a question in the video because obviously I was missing something. So I would have already my thought process there. Basically, I would just copy and paste that into the comment section of the video. Here was what I was thinking. Why did you come up with a different answer? If he didn't explain it in the video already, obviously. And I think that's very important to do. And the other thing is, if you hear something that you think is very important, something you've never seen or heard, write it down, take some notes on it, and try to expand on it on your own time. Think about why they are saying this thing, or how you can apply it to your game. And if you can't come up with the answers on your own, make sure you're asking questions as well. And a lot of the training sites, the coaches are relatively active in their own video threads, so you're going to have a really good chance to get some very cheap coaching from some of the top professionals that are out there. So find a training site and definitely watch videos, but make sure you're really putting time and effort into watching those videos and just not doing it casually while you're eating dinner or doing laundry or something. Make sure you're focusing on the video. I do have Run It Once on here. The only reason I do that, this is the only site that I subscribe to currently, so it's the only one that I kind of feel qualified to talk about it. I think that this site is amazing as far as the coaches that it hires, the content that it puts out, the frequency that it puts out content. For me, it's kind of the best bang for the buck. You have players like Ben Solsky, Sauce123, putting videos out for cash games, and a bunch of other really, really qualified cash game players. Guys like Jason Kuhn putting out videos for MTTs. You've got Phil Galfond doing the PLO videos. I mean, there's great content that's out there that's available on Run It Once, so I do recommend checking that out. But like I said, there are a plethora of other options out there, so if you don't think that's the one for you, definitely feel free to just do some Google searching, look at the reviews of the sites, and find whichever one you think is best for you. So the next one is reading books. And similar to the videos, it's important that when you're reading the poker books, you're really putting all your focus and your energy into reading the book. Poker books are not something that are meant to be read all in one setting. It's meant to be read slowly, and you're trying to really absorb the information as much as you can and using it to be ready to put into practice at the tables. So for me, when I would read the book, I would usually probably go one chapter at a time. That seemed like the most efficient way to do it, just because usually one chapter is one concept. And so I would read the chapter, and then I would go to the tables, and I would try to apply whatever I thought I learned, see how it was working for me, and if I felt like I didn't quite get it when I was trying it out, then I would go back and I would reread the chapter and see what things, I had that experience of trying it out, so when I went back to the book, I kind of knew what I was looking for, like why isn't it working in this spot, and if the book kind of highlighted that, then where my mistake was coming from, then I had a good reference point for me, what I didn't feel was working. So when I saw it in the book, I was able to learn from that much better. The information really struck home with me because I had tried it, it wasn't working, and now I knew what I was missing out on. So that's something I recommend for some people. For some of the books that are out there, it's going to be very math heavy. So let's actually give an example here. So I put some books aside that I was going to show you guys. So we'll start out with one that I highly recommend to everyone. I'm actually rereading it for the second time. You can see my bookmarks in here. But Applications of No Limit Holdem, I think, is a must-read for everybody. But the things that are in it are a little bit outdated in the sense that he used very common bet sizings and bet practices for his mathematical equations that were common at the time, but people don't really use anymore. So although his math is correct, it isn't 100% applicable to today's games. So that means when you're looking at this, you're going to need to go through the book and redo the math for the common bet sizings that you see in your games. And it's a really good chance for you to practice doing all the theoretical math for poker, and it's a really good chance. He's going to walk you step by step for how to build ranges in just about every situation. But in order to do that, you're going to have to redo the math on your own. after you've read a chapter in the book. So you're going to basically read a chapter in the book, and then you're going to go through and you're going to do all the math on your own and build those ranges based on the bet sizes that you're seeing at your games. And I think that's just invaluable practice for people. So that's another thing. Doing the math away from the table, trying it out at the tables, and going back and checking the book. That's another one. So let's go and check out a couple more books. So this one, a little dusty here. This one is for people that are kind of very, very beginners at poker, have never read a poker book before, or just getting into poker. Poker Math That Matters by Owen Gaines. It is a very, very good book for introducing you to the simplest mathematics of poker. We're talking like pot odds and implied odds and some of those simple terms. And he does a very good job of breaking it down in a way that's really easy to understand. And there's exercises that are built into the book to make sure you get to check your understanding. And by the time you finish that, you're going to have the basics down pretty darn well. And so if you've never done any poker math at all, I would certainly recommend starting out with something like that. That's a good introduction. And I have not personally read this book all the way through yet, but I'll just put it out there in case anybody really wants to basically read like a college textbook on poker. The Mathematics of Poker by Bill Chen and Jared Ackerman. This this reads like a calculus book, essentially. So I think I had started reading that book, and at the same time, I was kind of reading Applications of No Limit Holdem on the side, and I felt like Applications of No Limit Holdem was a little bit easier to digest and a little bit easier to pretty readily implement strategies and changes into my game. So I stuck with that one and never went back to Mathematics of Poker. But for those of you that want to have the complete picture, the complete answer, everything that's to do with the mathematics of poker, then that's going to be your book. That's going to be your big reference. And then the last book that I recommend, not last, but the last one that I will recommend while we're here, is Expert Heads Up No Limit Holdem. There's a volume 1 and there's a volume 2. Although the title says Heads Up No Limit Holdem, this is a book about poker. This book is meant to teach you optimal GTO strategies for beating poker in general. The reason it's heads up is because it's kind of the easiest form to talk about and to analyze when there's only 2 players in the pot. Once you start adding another player or 2 players, the game trees get so huge and so difficult to really analyze that the author here stuck with Heads Up No Limit Holdem. And initially, I think it was designed for Heads Up Sit and Goes, was the initial thought process, but it's so well written and it does such a great job of teaching you a lot of the GTO fundamentals and theories and helping you think about how to think about GTO that it really applies to any aspect of poker. And I definitely recommend that you spend some time reading that book. And also in this one, there are exercises and practice and questions that it asks throughout the book. Very important that you take the time and do those exercises as you're reading through the book. And again, it's another one that you're going to want to read very slowly and make sure you understand everything that he's talking about as you're going through it. Okay, so next here, I've already hinted a lot about a lot of this stuff, but we'll just keep on going here. Hand reviews, making sure that as you're playing your session, every time you come to a spot where anytime you feel uncertain, you want to mark that hand. And if you can, take some notes. I used to actually have like a yellow, I don't know what you call them, office notepad or whatever. And when I got to a hand, I would, make a quick note of the hand and then note my thoughts at the time and maybe make a question if I had time. This was back before I was playing, when I was only playing like 2 tables at a time and I actually had time to do that. But if you're someone that's constantly having questions, you probably should only be playing 1 table anyways. So then you'll have time to write these notes down. And I definitely recommend that way when it comes back to review, you have your questions ready to go. You have your thought process and what you were struggling with. And so what you'll find if you don't have that, a lot of times you'll get to the hand and you'll just have no idea what was going on and no idea what your question was, and you'll end up just skipping over it when it could have been a really good spot to learn from. So if you have the opportunity, make sure you're taking some notes about why you're marking the hand. But anytime you're a little confused, I definitely mark the hand. And if you can, you want to do your reviews right after the session of as many hands that you marked. Writing out your thought process, going through your whatever study method you have, putting it in the forums. A lot of times you'll feel pretty tired after the session, so you won't be able to do that. So that's why it's important to have that study time scheduled and planned out, so that if you aren't able to do it right after the session, you have a time where you can get to those hands. The other thing is a large sample review. So not only are you reviewing specific hands, but you're reviewing large samples. And what this is you mark all your hands that got to the river, or all hands that were where the pot was over 25 big blinds, or all hands where the pot was over 50 big blinds. Whatever, you're setting up a situation and you're just going hand through hand through hand through hand through hand through hand, and you're just checking to see if there's anything that you see as awkward or maybe a mistake, or you're just looking for situations where you might have a question or something that looks like a mistake, or whatever the situation is. You're looking for a tendency or a leak that you can maybe plug by going through all these hands together, where you can find a pattern. And that's very important as well. A lot of times when you're doing large sample reviews, it's best to do them with somebody else, because I think an outside eye is going to be able to find a pattern that's a leak probably a little better than you would. But even doing it yourself, if you're seeing these spots and you're constantly seeing a spot where it's like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, maybe I shouldn't have done that, that's a good indicator for you that something's going on, and now you can post something in the forums or use some sort of study tool to see if you can plug that leak. Okay, next I have range and strategy work. So range work is saying, like, what is my opening range under the gun? What is my 3-betting range on the button? I think it's very important away from the tables to spend a lot of time building some set and defined ranges for you, and also have a strong understanding of why you built those ranges, because a lot of times there's going to be table conditions where, because there's some players at the table that are playing a very bad strategy, it's going to allow you to deviate from some of your ranges. Whether the strategy that they're playing is they open way too wide and then fold way too wide to 3-bets, or maybe they open way too tight and never fold to 3-bets, or any number of things that they're doing that are way out of line. You need to understand why you built the strategy that you have, your base strategy, so that you can understand when to quickly shift away from it to something in some direction. So spending time away from the tables and trying to build ranges for any situation, I think, is pretty important. And obviously this is something that you're not going to be able to do in one day or even 1 week, but doing it little by little is definitely going to give you an edge over a lot of players that aren't doing that. And strategy work is pretty similar, but strategy is a much bigger picture. So when I'm saying range here, we're talking 3-betting range in this spot, but your strategy is in the small blind. I'm going to 3-bet this amount, I'm going to call this amount, I'm going to fold this, right? So we know what our line is for each situation, but also how much you're going to 3-bet. And when you call, what are your check raising frequencies? What are your check calling frequencies? What are your check folding? So your strategy is your whole thought process for a certain situation. And it is important to work on those. Obviously, you can't, it's going to be very difficult to build a complete strategy where you're ready to handle any situation, but spending time working on those certain things is going to help you. So looking at a flop texture, you've already done your range work for calling in the big blind. So now look at some textures and build some balanced strategies for check raising and check calling, and build those balanced strategies on the flop, and then move it to the turn. If you check called, what are you check raising the turn ever on certain turns? If you are, what turns are you looking for? You're practicing those kinds of things away from the table. And the strategy work actually will come about in just about everything that you're doing. When you're doing your hand reviews, when you're reading the book, when you're watching the videos and all that stuff. Really what you're doing is you're working on your overall game strategy, but also spending time away from the tables and really focusing on a specific part of that strategy is definitely very important as well. So those are basically the study methods that I kind of wanted to touch on. The last thing I'm going to do is show you guys some study software that I use and recommend, and that will be the end of the video. So be right back when we got those popped up. Okay, so one of the first ones I wanted to show you is Flopzilla. There are a couple other programs out there that do the similar things, and I'll show you one of the other ones as well. But this software is very good for when you're doing hand versus range. So over here you'll have your hand, you'll give a player a range, and you can be very, very specific with the ranges that you're giving players. You can add all kinds of weights, you can do all kinds of different things with this. But it gives you a very, very good visual. You can very quickly see what you're up against, equities. You can see how certain turns are going to affect. I mean, this is a very good, quick way to practice understanding how hands in your range are doing against the other player's range. And one thing I was talking about saving is you can add categories here, enter a name, and you can save all your ranges when you're doing your range work here. If you're going to be using the software a lot, I would definitely recommend doing that. So this is one software that I highly recommend for a lot of players. I think it's very cheap as well. And it's going to be a good tool for you when you're practicing doing that range work and stuff like that. So the other software that's pretty similar to that, but a little bit more advanced, is Poker Ranger. I'm not really doing big reviews on the hands here. But anyways, right away we'll see the equities. The difference between this one is it allows you to do range versus range analysis. So instead of doing hand versus range, now you're able to look at your range versus their range and understand how each of you guys are doing. So here you can break it down range versus range. You can see how specific hands in the range are breaking down versus the other player's range as well, which is what the Flopzilla was doing. So obviously the higher in the range, or the more green it is, the better the hand in that range is doing. You can go over here and change players and get that map out, and you can have a spreadsheet over here that you can use. You can see how it changes on all the different turn cards. I mean, so this is giving you another really nice tool for analyzing those ranges, and that's Poker Ranger. This one's a little bit more expensive, but definitely very handy for using. And the other thing, when I was talking about drilling, equity training here. So this is something that I've done in my stream a couple times. It's going to give you a hand that's in your range. It's going to give a board texture. You can look at the villain's range here, and you're guessing how much equity this hand that's in your range has against that. So this is a good drill that you can do to practice over and over, and then you click solve, and then it'll tell you, nope, actually this one has 45%. Here's how much you're off, and you can just keep doing this for 10-15 minutes, and boom, you've got a quick, easy way to practice kind of seeing where you are at in situations. You can also go to turns and rivers and do the same thing. So there's that software. The next, I'll show two things that do a very similar thing. You have one of these, one or the other is mandatory for people that are playing sit and goes and MTTs. And it's a ICMizer is one. And basically what it'll allow you to do is you plug in stack sizes for all the players. You plug in antes blinds. If you need to plug in payouts for figuring ICM situations, you can do that. You go through and you plug in all the information, you hit calculate, and it's going to tell you your pushing and fold ranges or your calling versus shove ranges. So this is really going to help you fine-tune your short stack game, which is very common in sit and goes and MTTs. The one thing that's nice about this software, there's two things that's really nice about this software, is one is it has the MTT function, so you can actually calculate ICM situations when there's a bunch of other players at other tables. And it also has a function for bounty hunters and progressive knockouts and knockout tournaments, which are getting more and more popular these days. So if you're playing in a lot of those, I would definitely recommend going with this program. The downside of this program for me is that it was a little bit less intuitive on how to use it and a little bit more difficult to read the results, but still a very, very powerful program. something I highly recommend. And the next one here is Holdem Resources Calculator. So this is the other one of the two potential mandatory softwares. If you're playing MTTs and sit and goes, they are mandatory. One of them is. So this one is doing the same thing. Basically, you give it a bunch of you input a bunch of information that depicts your situation, and it's going to tell you shoving ranges. So here, what is this, 10-handed? If everyone has these stack sizes here, this is the shoving range for under the gun. And if the undergun shoves, here's everyone's calling ranges. So you get a very quick, very easy to understand, very easy to learn from output that you can use to study from any situation. So when you're in these short stack situations in MTTs, you can, and you weren't quite sure whether you should have called or folded or jammed or whatever the situation was, you have a very quick study tool to be able to give you the answers for that situation. And yeah, so Holdem Resources Calculator. Okay, another study tool that I wanted to show, and I think this one is probably mandatory for just about everybody. Or if it's not mandatory, I highly, highly, highly recommend it, is Card Runners EV. This is probably the software that I've spent the most of my study time utilizing when I'm analyzing certain lines and certain strategies. It has a lot of functionality built into it. I'm not going to go over all the different things that I can do, but basically what it allows you to do is you can set out an entire game tree. It's gonna force you to make some assumptions about the opponent and their strategy and things like that. So you'll have to make some reads, but basically what you do is you give your reads and you say, based on those reads, you can find the absolute highest EV line against your opponent, given that situation. And what this allows you to do is go in and fine-tune your strategies in a lot of different situations versus the opponents that you're seeing in your games. And the way that I usually typically set it is, because our assumptions are never going to be perfect, I'll say if the opponent plays like this, then here's the best strategy. And if the opponent plays like this, then here's the best strategy. And so I'll get a good idea of kind of a range. And, of what I think my opponents are playing. So I'm not saying he's only doing this strategy, because we're never going to be perfect, right? So I'll give him some different assumptions, different situations, and I'll kind of see how everything fits out in that situation. But that's going to give you a very good idea of how you want to be playing against those types of players. And so yeah, you'll just go through here and raise, call. It starts you out. You go in and you input your ranges. You can do different things with flop textures, turn textures, river textures, and you can go through every conceivable situation you can come up with. You can plug it into here. It'll take some work. It'll take some time. But the results that you're going to get from it are going to be incredibly valuable to your game. And so I definitely recommend everybody spends a lot of time learning the software and using it in their study time. Very, very valuable tool. He's recently come out with this new tool called GTO Plus. I actually haven't even downloaded yet and looked into it. I believe when you purchase Card Runners EV, you get them both at the same time for a pretty cheap price. I think it's down to $70 at this point. But this is trying to do a little bit of what the next software that I'm going to be talking about, Pile Solver. This is trying to do some of the same things, but at a much more affordable price. So it might be a good introduction for you guys to look into some equilibrium solvers and looking at GTO strategies and things like that. GTO Plus. I'll leave that if you guys YouTube that name or Google that name, you'll be able to check out the software and look into it for yourselves. But just wanted to point that one out as well. And then the last software that I'm going to show, the cream of the crop. This is the top of the tier for the study software, Pile Solver. Basically, what I want to say about this software is, if you really want to try to push your game to the max, if you've been doing all of the other stuff, using all the other software, you feel like your game's at a really good point, but you just want to try to push it to the next level, this is where you're going to have to go. This is going to give you the answer for poker in heads-up situations, basically. The one thing that I want to discourage everyone from doing is, if you are going to use this software, don't try to use it for every single situation and say, this is how I'm going to play, because you're not going to be able to do what Pile Solver does. Humans just can't memorize all these situations, and you're not going to be able to play it perfectly in all these situations. But what you can do is, when you're analyzing hands from Pile Solver, look for patterns. What kind of hands is Pile Solver using as bluffs? What kind of board textures is it bluffing a bunch? Why is it bluffing a bunch on those board textures? What is the range versus range equities? What was the line that got to that point? There's reasons behind why Pile Solver is doing everything, and there are patterns that emerge in a lot of different situations when you're using Pile Solver, and that's where the learning comes from, trying to understand the reasons why and trying to find those patterns, understand the patterns, and those are things that you're going to have a better chance at implementing into your own game and mimicking it are the patterns and not the actual frequencies that it's coming out with. And so that's going to be a step in getting you towards, a much higher level of play. And this is kind of where I'm at right now in my game. Still using a lot of the other stuff, but moving more towards this. But I think you can get a lot of benefit from a lot of the other softwares that are much cheaper than this, and even the free stuff like the forums and some of the non-software things like the watching videos. I think you can get a lot of benefit from those things as well without having to invest the initial money in Pile Solver. But if it's something that you want, it's out there. It's definitely a very, very powerful tool. Definitely something that at some point in your poker career, if you want to get to the top level, is going to be necessary. But it's not necessary right away. So I figured I would at least show it to you guys so you have that. If you didn't already know about it, that's just another option that's available for you. So that is my video for studying. Hopefully it helped you guys out there. If you have questions or comments, you can hit me up on while I'm streaming on Twitch, or you can hit a comment down below, and I'll be happy to answer your questions, guys. Thank you for checking it out. See ya.